A man publicly humiliated for living in poverty, but what his mocker doesn't know will make him pay dearly. When buried genius is thrust into the light, the line between contempt and respect will shatter before the world's eyes. A secret hidden in a rundown garage is about to shake an entire industry. Follow my story to the end, hit like and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The wrench slipped from Ethan Cole's hand and clattered against the concrete floor, the sound echoing through the small garage like a gunshot. He didn't pick it up. Instead, he stayed crouched beneath the rusted Ford, his knuckles scraped raw, his shirt soaked through with sweat and motor oil. The June heat pressed down on Greenfield like a wet towel, and the oscillating fan in the corner did nothing but push the hot air around. "Dad, you okay?" Lily's voice came from the doorway. Ethan glanced up to see her silhouette framed against the late afternoon glare, her school backpack still slung over one shoulder. 16 years old, dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing the same defiant expression she'd worn since she was small enough to fit in his toolbox. "Yeah, sweetheart, just wrestling with a stubborn bolt." He forced a smile, wiped his hands on a rag that was already beyond saving, and slid out from under the car. "How was school?" She shrugged, dropping the backpack onto the wooden stool near the workbench. "Same as always. Mrs. Patterson says I should apply for that engineering summer camp again." "You should." "We can't afford it, Dad." The words hung between them, blunt and familiar. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. She wasn't wrong. The garage barely covered rent and groceries. The scholarship application had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 2 weeks, half filled out, the pen dried up from neglect. "We'll figure it out," he said finally, knowing how hollow it sounded. Lily didn't respond. She just walked over to the pegboard where his tools hung in obsessive order, every socket, every screwdriver in its designated spot, and ran her finger along the edge. It was a gesture she'd done since she was little, a way of connecting with him without words. Ethan had built this place from nothing after Sarah died, after the funeral expenses and medical bills had gutted what little savings they had, after the offers of help from distant relatives dried up and the town moved on. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge," he said. "Heat it up if you're hungry. I've got to finish this before Mr. Henley picks it up tomorrow." She nodded and headed toward the back door that led to their small apartment above the garage. But she paused at the threshold. "You sure you're okay?" "Always am." Another lie, but a necessary one. When she was gone, Ethan leaned against the workbench and closed his eyes. The ache in his lower back had become a permanent companion, a reminder that 32 wasn't as young as it used to be. He'd been doing this for 10 years now, keeping the garage alive, keeping Lily fed, keeping the promise he'd made to Sarah in those final days when the cancer had already won. "Take care of our girl. Make sure she gets out of this town." He reached for the coffee mug on the bench, found it empty, and set it down harder than he meant to. The sound startled him back to the present. He had work to do. The Ford wasn't going to fix itself, and Mr. Henley needed it running by morning. But as he bent to retrieve the wrench, he heard the growl of an engine outside. Not the familiar rattle of the pickups and sedans that usually pulled into his lot. This was different, deeper, expensive. Ethan straightened and walked to the open garage door just as a silver Maserati Gran Turismo rolled to a stop in the gravel driveway. The paint was flawless, the chrome accents gleaming even in the fading light. It looked like it had been teleported from another world, a world that didn't include cracked asphalt and hand-painted signs. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, mid-40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly income. His hair was dark and slicked back, his watch catching the sunlight in a way that screamed Rolex. He surveyed the garage with the kind of expression people reserve for roadkill. "This is the place?" The man's voice carried across the lot, smooth and dismissive. He wasn't asking Ethan. He was asking the universe how he'd ended up here. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and walked over. "Can I help you?" The man's gaze flicked over him. Torn shirt, grease-stained hands, the faint scar on his jawline from a wrench that had slipped 5 years ago. The assessment took less than 2 seconds, and the verdict was written all over his face. "I need someone to look at my car," the man said. "There's a noise coming from the engine. I was told there's a mechanic here." "That's me." The man blinked, as if the idea of Ethan being competent at anything was a personal affront. "You." Yeah, Ethan Cole. He extended a hand. The man glanced at it, then back at Ethan's face, and didn't move. Victor Hale. Ethan dropped his hand. What's the problem with your car, Mr. Hale? Victor gestured vaguely toward the Maserati. I already told you. There's a noise. What kind of noise? A mechanical noise. Ethan waited, but Victor offered nothing else. The guy wasn't being deliberately unhelpful. He genuinely didn't know, which wasn't uncommon. Most people couldn't tell the difference between a belt squeal and a rod knock, but there was something in Victor's tone, in the way he stood with his arms crossed, that suggested he didn't think the distinction mattered. Mind if I take a look? Ethan asked. Victor waved a hand as if granting permission to a servant. Be my guest. Ethan walked to the front of the car and popped the hood. The engine bay was immaculate, the kind of clean that came from professional detailing rather than regular maintenance. He leaned in, checking the belts, the hoses, the fluid levels. Everything looked fine on the surface. He gestured for Victor to start the engine. The Maserati roared to life, and immediately Ethan heard it. A faint metallic tapping, rhythmic and insistent, coming from deep in the block. Not catastrophic yet, but it would be if left unchecked. He straightened. You've got a problem with your timing chain tensioner. It's failing. Victor frowned. What does that mean? Means the chain that keeps your engine's valves in sync is starting to slack. If it goes completely, your engine's done. Can you fix it? I can, but it's not a quick job. I'll need to order the part, and it'll take a few days to get here. Victor's expression darkened. A few days? I'm only in town until tomorrow. Then I'd suggest not driving it much. The tensioner could let go any time. That's unacceptable. Ethan shrugged. It's not about what's acceptable, it's about what's real. You can take it to a dealership in the city if you want, but they'll tell you the same thing. Victor stared at him, and for a moment Ethan thought the man might actually explode, but instead he pulled out his phone and tapped at the screen, his jaw tight. How much? For the part and labor, about $1,200. $1,200. Victor said it like Ethan had just asked for a kidney. That's the going rate. Victor looked up from his phone, and there was something ugly in his eyes now. I'm sure it is, for a place like this. Ethan felt the words land, sharp and deliberate. He didn't respond. There was no point. He'd heard variations of this his whole life. From teachers who'd written him off, from Sarah's parents who'd never thought he was good enough for their daughter, from the town council that had denied his application for a small business loan 3 times before he'd given up and scraped together the cash himself. Look, Victor said, his tone shifting to something that might have been mistaken for reasonable if you didn't listen too closely. I'm sure you're very good at what you do, but I don't have time for this. I have a meeting in Chicago tomorrow, and I need my car running. Then let me fix it. In one night? I didn't say that. I said it'll take a few days to get the part. Victor exhaled sharply and glanced around the garage again, his gaze landing on the cluttered workbench, the calendar on the wall that was 3 months out of date, the faded sign above the door that read Cole's Auto Repair in letters that were peeling at the edges. Is there anyone else in this town who can do it faster? No. Fantastic. Victor tapped at his phone again, then looked up. Fine. Do what you can tonight. I'll come back in the morning, and if it's not done, I'll have it towed to a real shop. The words hung in the air like a slap. Ethan felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. I'll see what I can do. Victor nodded, already turning back toward the Maserati. I'm staying at the inn down the road. Call me when it's ready. He tossed a business card onto the hood of the car and walked away, his shoes crunching on the gravel. Ethan watched him go, then picked up the card. Victor Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Hale Industries. The address listed was in Manhattan. Of course it was. He pocketed the card and looked back at the Maserati. The smart thing would be to let Victor tow it somewhere else. Let someone else deal with his condescension and impossible deadlines. But Ethan had never been good at walking away from a challenge. And more than that, he needed the money. $1,200 would cover the rent and then some. Maybe even that scholarship application fee. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. By the time the sun set, Ethan had the engine half disassembled on the garage floor. The timing chain tensioner was worse than he'd thought. cracked in two places, held together by sheer stubbornness and luck. He'd called every parts supplier within 50 miles, but no one had the replacement in stock. The soonest he could get it was 3 days out, which meant Victor Hale's car wasn't going anywhere tomorrow. Ethan sat on the floor, his back against the Maserati's front tire, and rubbed his eyes. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry wasps, and his stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since lunch. He glanced at his watch, nearly 10. Lily would be asleep by now. He should call Victor, let him know the situation. But the thought of hearing that dismissive voice again made his teeth ache. Instead, he stood and walked to the workbench, where a battered notebook lay open. The pages were filled with sketches, engine designs, modifications, ideas he'd scribbled down over the years whenever inspiration struck. Most of it was theoretical, the kind of thing he'd never have the resources to build. But it kept his mind sharp, kept him sane. He flipped to a fresh page and started drawing. Not the Maserati's engine. Something else. Something better. His hand moved across the page, the pencil scratching out lines and curves, annotations and calculations. He lost himself in it, the way he always did, until the design started to take shape. A variable valve timing system that could adapt in real time to driving conditions. Lighter, more efficient, more powerful. The kind of innovation that could revolutionize engine performance. He stopped and stared at the drawing. It was good, better than good. But it didn't matter. No one would ever see it. No one would ever care. He closed the notebook and shoved it back onto the shelf. The next morning, Victor Hale arrived at 8 sharp, his expression already set to irritation. Ethan met him at the door, wiping his hands on a clean rag. "It's not ready," Ethan said before Victor could speak. Victor's jaw tightened. "You said—" "I said I'd see what I could do. The tensioner's completely shot. I can't fix it without a replacement part, and the earliest I can get one is 3 days. 3 days? Yeah." Victor pulled out his phone, his fingers stabbing at the screen. "This is unacceptable. I'm calling a tow truck." "You can do that. But like I said, they'll tell you the same thing." Victor looked up, his eyes narrowed. "You know what I think? I think you're trying to squeeze more money out of me. I think you saw an expensive car and decided to milk it." Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. "That's not—" "Save it." Victor held up a hand. "I've dealt with guys like you my whole life. Small-town mechanics who think they can overcharge because there's no competition. I quoted you a fair price." "Fair?" Victor laughed, sharp and humorless. "You wouldn't know fair if it hit you in the face." Ethan didn't respond. He just stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, feeling the weight of every condescending word. And then he heard the scrape of a shoe on concrete behind him. He turned. Lily stood in the doorway to the apartment, her hair still mussed from sleep, her expression unreadable. She'd heard everything. "Lily." "It's fine, Dad." Her voice was flat, distant. Victor glanced at her, then back at Ethan, and something shifted in his face. Not shame, Victor Hale didn't seem capable of that, but a kind of calculation, as if he just realized there was an audience. "Look," Victor said, his tone smoothing out, "I'm sure you're doing your best, but I don't have time for this. I'll have the car towed to a dealership in the city." "You do that," Ethan said quietly. Victor nodded, already pulling out his phone to make the call. He walked back to the Maserati, leaving Ethan and Lily standing in the doorway. "Dad," Lily said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you say something?" "What was I supposed to say?" "I don't know. Anything. He was—" She stopped, her hands balling into fists. "He was treating you like you were nothing. People like him always do. That doesn't make it okay." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't have an answer. She was right. It wasn't okay. But what was he supposed to do? Fight back? Argue with a man who had more money in his wallet than Ethan made in a year? It wouldn't change anything. It never did. "Go get ready for school," he said finally. Lily stared at him for another moment, then turned and walked back into the apartment, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Ethan stayed where he was, watching as the tow truck arrived and loaded the Maserati onto its flatbed. Victor didn't say another word to him, just climbed into the truck's cab and disappeared down the road. When they were gone, Ethan walked back into the garage and looked at the engine parts scattered across the floor. He should clean up. Get back to work on Mr. Henley's Ford. But instead, he just stood there, staring at the empty space where the Maserati had been. And he felt nothing. 3 days later, Ethan was elbow-deep in a transmission rebuild when his phone buzzed. He ignored it at first. His hands were covered in grease, and he was in the middle of a tricky alignment, but it kept buzzing, insistent and annoying. He wiped his hands and grabbed the phone off the workbench. The screen was lit up with notifications. Text messages. Emails. All from people he hadn't heard from in years. Did you see this? Is this for real? Ethan, call me ASAP. He frowned and opened the first link someone had sent. It loaded slowly, the garage's Wi-Fi struggling as always, but when the page finally appeared, his stomach dropped. It was a social media post. Victor Hale's account. The photo showed Ethan's notebook, the one he'd left on the workbench, open to the page with his engine design. The sketch was clear, detailed, unmistakable. The caption read, "Found this in a backwoods garage. Small-town mechanic thinks he's an engineer. Cute." There were hundreds of comments already, most of them mocking, laughing emojis, sarcastic remarks about people who didn't know their place. Ethan's hands shook as he scrolled through them. He felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Victor had taken a picture of his work, his private work, and posted it online for the world to ridicule. "Dad?" He looked up. Lily was standing in the doorway again, her phone in her hand, her face pale. "I saw it," she said. Ethan set his phone down, his jaw tight. "It's fine. It's not fine. She stopped, her voice cracking. "He had no right." "No, he didn't." "So what are you going to do?" Ethan didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know. What could he do? Victor Hale was untouchable. A CEO. A man with resources and influence. And Ethan? He was just a mechanic in a town no one had heard of. But as he stood there staring at his daughter's face, something shifted inside him. Not anger, not yet, but something colder, harder. "I don't know us," he said finally, "but I'll figure it out." Lily nodded, and for the first time in days, there was something in her eyes that looked like hope. Ethan turned back to his phone and stared at the post, at his sketch, at the hundreds of people who thought it was a joke, and he started to plan. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He'd created the social media account years ago, but never used it, never had a reason to. But now, staring at Victor Hale's post, he felt the urge to respond, to say something, anything. But what? He scrolled through the comments again, his chest tight. Most of them were predictable, strangers mocking something they didn't understand, but there were a few that caught his attention. Engineers, by the look of their profiles, pointing out details in the sketch, asking questions. "Is that a variable valve timing system? The tolerances on this are insane. Who drew this? This actually looks legit." Ethan leaned back in his chair and exhaled. Maybe it wasn't all bad. Maybe someone out there saw what he'd been trying to do. His phone buzzed again. Another notification, but this one was different. A direct message, not a comment. He opened it. "Mr. Cole, my name is Elena Moretti. I'm the Director of Advanced Engineering at Moretti Automotive in Turin. I saw your design on Mr. Hale's post, and I would very much like to speak with you. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." Ethan stared at the message, reading it twice, then a third time. Moretti Automotive. He knew the name. Everyone in the industry did. They were one of the most prestigious engineering firms in Europe, known for pushing the boundaries of performance and innovation, and they wanted to talk to him. He glanced at the clock. Nearly midnight, too late to call. But he typed out a response anyway, his fingers moving faster than his brain could keep up. "Miss Moretti, thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to discuss this with you. When would be a good time?" He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The reply came almost instantly. "Tomorrow, if possible. I'm currently in New York on business, but I can arrange a video call. Does 10 a.m. work for you?" Ethan's heart pounded. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. He'd have to close the garage, reschedule Mr. Henley's pickup, figure out what to wear, what to say. "That works," he typed. "Excellent. I'll send you a link. Looking forward to it." Ethan set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. His mind was racing, 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. But the message was still there, glowing on the screen, undeniable. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street below. The garage sign flickered in the distance, the neon buzzing faintly. He'd built this place from nothing, kept it alive through sheer stubbornness. And now, maybe, just maybe, something was about to change. He didn't sleep that night, just sat at the table, staring at Elena Moretti's message, wondering if this was the break he'd been waiting for his whole life, or just another disappointment waiting to happen. The video call connected at exactly 10 o'clock, and Elena Moretti's face filled the laptop screen. She was younger than Ethan had expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a tailored blazer that suggested she'd already been through several meetings that morning. "Mr. Cole," she said, her accent crisp and precise, "thank you for making time." Ethan shifted in his chair, suddenly aware of how cramped the apartment kitchen looked on camera. "Miss Moretti, I appreciate you reaching out. Please call me Elena." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze dropping to something off-screen. "I've been studying your design since I saw it yesterday. The variable valve timing system, it's remarkable work." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "It's just a sketch. Nothing built, nothing tested. That's not what concerns me." Elena's eyes met his again. "What concerns me is that someone with your level of understanding is working in isolation. Tell me, Mr. Cole." "Ethan, where did you study?" "I didn't." She blinked. "You're self-taught?" "Community college for 2 years. Then life happened." He didn't elaborate, didn't mention Sarah's diagnosis, the mounting bills, the way his education had evaporated like steam. "I've been running the garage for 10 years. Elena was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "I've been in this industry for 12 years. I've worked with graduates from MIT, Cambridge, ETH Zurich, and your sketch shows more innovation than most of what I see in our R&D department." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. It felt like a trick, like she was setting him up for something. "I want to offer you an opportunity," Elena continued. "Moretti Automotive is hosting a presentation at the International Automotive Innovation Conference in Detroit next month. We're showcasing emerging technologies, new voices in engineering. I'd like you to present your work." The words took a moment to land. When they did, Ethan actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "You're serious?" "Completely. I'm a mechanic." "You're an engineer who happens to work as a mechanic." Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, as if the distinction was obvious. "There's a difference." Ethan rubbed his jaw, trying to process what she was saying. "I don't have anything to present, just sketches in a notebook." "Then we build it." "We?" "Moretti Automotive will provide the resources, workshop space, materials, technical support. You bring the design. We'll fabricate a working prototype in time for the conference." It sounded insane, impossible, the kind of offer that didn't exist in the real world. "Why?" Ethan asked. "Why me?" Elena tilted her head slightly, considering the question. "Because the industry is stagnant. We keep refining the same ideas, chasing marginal improvements. Your work is different. It's bold. And frankly, we need bold right now." "And if it doesn't work?" "Then we learn something, but I don't think that's going to happen." She paused. "I should tell you, this isn't charity. If we move forward, Moretti Automotive will want to discuss partnership terms, patents, production rights, profit sharing, but that's a conversation for later. Right now, I need to know if you're interested." Ethan looked past the laptop, out the window where the garage sign flickered in the morning light. He thought about Lily, about the scholarship she deserved, about the years he'd spent fixing other people's mistakes instead of building something of his own. "I'm interested," he said. Elena smiled, a small, professional expression that didn't quite reach her eyes, but felt genuine anyway. "Good. I'll have our legal team send over the initial paperwork. In the meantime, I need you to start refining your designs, full technical specifications, material requirements, tolerance ranges. Can you do that?" "Yeah, I can do that." "Excellent. We'll speak again in a few days." She reached for something off-screen, then paused. Ethan, one more thing. Victor Hale's post, it's still circulating. People are talking about it. I know. How you handle this matters. The conference will have media coverage, industry executives, investors. Your reputation starts now. Ethan nodded slowly. What would you do? Me? I'd ignore him. Let the work speak for itself. Elena's expression hardened slightly. Men like Hale thrive on reaction. Don't give him one. After she disconnected, Ethan sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, staring at the blank screen. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He stood and walked to the cabinet above the fridge, reaching for the notebook he'd shoved there after Victor's post went viral. The pages were worn, the binding cracked from years of use. He flipped through the sketches, seeing them differently now. Not as pipe dreams, but as blueprints. The apartment door creaked open behind him. Lily appeared, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess. You're up early, Ethan said. Couldn't sleep. She walked to the counter and poured herself a glass of water. Was that her? The woman from Italy? Turin. And yeah, that was her. Lily leaned against the counter, studying him. What did she say? Ethan closed the notebook, running his thumb along the spine. She wants me to present at a conference in Detroit. Present what? The design. The one Victor posted. Lily's eyes widened. Are you going to do it? I think so. You think so? He looked at her, seeing Sarah in the set of her jaw, the way she crossed her arms when she was trying to hide how much she cared. It's complicated, Lily. This isn't just about showing up and talking. I'd have to build a working prototype, stand in front of hundreds of people, prove that I'm not just some small-town guy with delusions. You're not. You have to say that. You're my daughter. I don't have to say anything, her voice was firm. And you know I wouldn't if I didn't mean it. That was true. Lily had inherited her mother's inability to lie convincingly. What if I screw it up? The question came out before he could stop it. Lily set down her glass. Then you screw it up. But at least you tried. She paused. Mom would have wanted you to try. The words hit harder than she probably intended. Ethan felt something twist in his chest, painful and familiar. Sarah had always been the one pushing him, believing in him even when he didn't believe in himself. And then she was gone, and he'd spent 10 years just surviving instead of living. Yeah, he said quietly. She would have. Lily walked over and hugged him, quick and fierce, the way she used to when she was small. Then she pulled back, already heading toward her room. I'm taking a shower. You should probably eat something. You look terrible. He smiled despite himself. Thanks, kid. When she was gone, Ethan opened the notebook again and started making notes. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a haze of phone calls, video conferences, and technical documents. Elena had connected him with Moretti Automotive's engineering team, a group of designers and fabricators who treated his sketches like they were holy texts. They asked questions he'd never considered, pushed back on assumptions he'd made, refined the design until it was something that could actually be built. Ethan worked through the nights. The garage closed more often than not, surviving on coffee and the sandwiches Lily left in the fridge with post-it notes that said things like, "Eat this," and "Seriously, Dad." Mr. Henley's Ford sat untouched in the corner. The answering machine filled up with messages from customers wondering when he'd reopen. He ignored all of it, too focused on the schematics spreading across his kitchen table, the CAD software he was learning to use, the prototype parts being shipped from Turin. But the work felt good. For the first time in years, he wasn't just fixing things. He was creating. On a Thursday afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up to the garage. Ethan signed for 3 large crates, his hands clumsy with anticipation. Inside were precision-machined components, titanium valve springs, billet aluminum housings, custom sensors that probably cost more than his truck. He unpacked everything carefully, laying it out on the workbench like a surgeon preparing for an operation. The parts gleamed under the fluorescent lights, beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Components arrived? Yeah, just opened them. Good. We're on schedule. First assembly test is Monday. The team will walk you through it via video. He stared at the parts, feeling the weight of what he was about to attempt. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. Another text came through, this one from a number he didn't recognize. Saw you're working with Moretti. Guess you're moving up in the world. Congrats. There was no signature, but Ethan didn't need one. He knew Victor Hale's smugness even through a screen. He deleted the message without responding. That evening, Lily came home from school and found him in the garage, the prototype's first assembly laid out in pieces. Whoa, she said, walking closer. Is that it? Part of it. Still have a long way to go. She circled the workbench, her eyes taking in every detail. It's smaller than I thought it would be. Efficiency. Ethan picked up one of the valve springs, turning it in his fingers. Smaller means less weight, less friction, more power with less waste. And it really works? We'll find out Monday. Lily was quiet for a moment, then said, People at school are talking about it. Ethan looked up. About what? You, the design. Someone saw Victor's post and showed it to their dad, who's apparently into cars. Now everyone knows. What are they saying? She shrugged. Most of them think it's cool. A few think you're crazy. She paused. Mrs. Patterson asked if you were really going to Detroit. What did you tell her? That you were? Lily met his eyes. You are, right? Yeah, Ethan said. I am. She smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. Monday came faster than Ethan wanted. He set up the laptop in the garage, angling the camera so the Moretti team could see the workbench. At precisely 9 a.m., the call connected, and 5 faces appeared on screen, engineers from different departments, all watching with the kind of focus that made Ethan's palms sweat. Good morning, Ethan, Elena said from the center square. Ready to begin? As I'll ever be. Let's start with the valve assembly. Marco will guide you through it. One of the other faces leaned forward, a man in his 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Ethan, you should have the primary housing in front of you, the one with the serial number stamped on the side. Ethan found it and held it up to the camera. Perfect. Now take the first valve spring, the shorter one, and insert it into the housing. Make sure the tension side is facing up. Ethan did as instructed, his hand steadier than he felt. The spring fit perfectly, clicking into place with a satisfying precision. Good, Marco said. Now the sensor array. They worked like that for 3 hours, assembling piece by piece, testing tolerances, adjusting alignment. The process was meticulous, demanding, and absolutely absorbing. Ethan forgot to be nervous, forgot about the cameras, the team watching, the fact that this was the most important thing he'd ever built. He just worked. By the time they finished, the prototype's core assembly was complete, a compact, elegantly brutal piece of machinery that looked nothing like the sketch he'd drawn weeks ago. Run the diagnostic, Elena said. Ethan connected the sensor cables to his laptop and launched the software Marco had sent him. Numbers began scrolling across the screen, valve timing sequences, pressure readings, response curves. The team watched in silence. Then Marco said, Ethan, those numbers. Yeah? They're perfect. Ethan looked at the screen again, sure he'd misread something, but Marco was right. Every measurement fell within the projected tolerances. The system was responding exactly as designed. We have a working prototype, Elena said, and there was something in her voice that might have been pride. Ethan sat back, staring at the assembly on his workbench. He'd done it, actually done it. Good work, Marco added. We'll need to run durability tests, thermal cycling, vibration analysis, but this is an excellent start. What's the timeline? Ethan asked. We have 3 weeks until the conference, Elena said. That's enough time if we stay on schedule. Ethan, I need you to prepare your presentation, technical overview, practical applications, performance data. Can you handle that? I'll figure it out. I know you will. Elena paused. One more thing. The conference organizers want to feature you in their promotional materials. They'll need a photo and brief biography. Ethan's stomach tightened. Promotional materials? You're one of the spotlight presenters. It's standard. He thought about what that meant. His face on posters, his name attached to something that could either launch his career or destroy what little credibility he had. Okay, he said. I'll send something over. After the call ended, Ethan sat alone in the garage, the prototype still on the workbench. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it, the reality of what he'd committed to. His phone buzzed. Another message from Victor Hale. Heard you're presenting at AAIC. Bold move for someone who's never been to college. Hope you're ready for that stage. Ethan read it twice, then set the phone down. Elena's advice echoed in his head. Don't give him a reaction, but it was hard not to. Because Victor was right about one thing. Ethan had never done anything like this before. Never stood in front of industry professionals, never defended his work against people who actually knew what they were talking about. He looked at the prototype again, then at his notebook filled with years of ideas no one had ever taken seriously. Maybe it was time they did. The following weeks were brutal. Ethan split his time between refining the presentation and running tests on the prototype, each day bleeding into the next. The garage stayed closed. The bills piled up. He barely saw Lily except in passing, both of them too busy with their own worlds to do more than exchange tired greetings. But the work progressed. The prototype passed every test Marco threw at it. The presentation came together slide by slide, each one reviewed and critiqued by Elena until it was sharp enough to cut. 10 days before the conference, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table rehearsing his opening remarks for the dozenth time when Lily walked in holding her phone. Dad, you need to see this. He looked up. What? She turned the screen toward him. It was Victor Hale's social media account again, but this time the post wasn't about Ethan's design. It was a screenshot of the conference schedule with Ethan's name circled in red. The caption read, Interesting choice by AAIC. Guess they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel this year. Can't wait to see this presentation. The comments were already flooding in. Some defending Ethan, most mocking him. Ethan felt something cold settle in his gut. When did he post this? An hour ago. It's already been shared like 200 times. He stood and walked to the window, his jaw tight. Victor wasn't just dismissive anymore. He was actively trying to undermine him. Are you okay? Lily asked. Yeah, you don't look okay. Ethan turned to face her. What do you want me to say, Lily? That it doesn't bother me? Because it does. But there's nothing I can do about it except show up and prove him wrong. So prove him wrong. That's the plan. She studied him for a moment, then walked over and grabbed the notebook off the table. Then stop rehearsing and start believing this is good enough. Because it is. He took the notebook from her, feeling the worn cover under his fingers. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice now because you're stressed. She headed toward her room, then paused. And Dad? Victor's an asshole. Don't let him make you forget why you're doing this. After she was gone, Ethan sat back down and opened the notebook. She was right. He'd been so focused on not screwing up that he'd lost sight of what mattered. This wasn't about Victor. It wasn't even about the conference. It was about proving to himself that he was more than the labels people had given him. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Elena's contact. Before he could second-guess himself, he typed out a message. I'm ready. Her response came a minute later. I know you are. See you in Detroit. Ethan closed the notebook and stood, walking to the garage one last time before bed. The prototype sat on the workbench, illuminated by the single overhead light. He ran his hand over the housing, feeling the precision of the machining, the care that had gone into every component. This was his, something he'd created from nothing but sketches and stubbornness, and in 9 days, the world would see it. He turned off the light and headed upstairs, already planning what he'd say when he stood on that stage. The flight to Detroit left at 6 in the morning, which meant Ethan was up at 4, double-checking the prototype case for the third time. The custom foam padding held everything secure, the assembled core, the backup components, the sensor array. He'd packed it himself, refusing to trust it to anyone else, and now he stood in the dim kitchen feeling like he was forgetting something critical. You have your phone charger? He turned. Lily was standing in the doorway, wrapped in her bathrobe, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Yeah, already packed. Presentation files? On the laptop and backed up to the cloud. She walked over and hugged him, her arms tight around his waist. You're going to be amazing. I'm going to try not to throw up on stage. That too. She pulled back, her expression serious now. Dad, I know you're nervous, but you've earned this. Don't let anyone make you feel like you haven't. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He kissed the top of her head, grabbed his bags, and headed for the door. Mrs. Patterson from next door had agreed to check in on Lily while he was gone. 3 days total, 2 for the conference and 1 for travel. It felt like abandoning her, even though she was 16 and more capable than he gave her credit for. The drive to the airport was quiet, the roads empty at that hour. Ethan parked in long term and hauled his bags through the terminal, the prototype case heavy in his grip. Security gave it a thorough inspection, running it through the scanner twice before a supervisor finally waved him through. By the time he reached the gate, his shirt was already damp with sweat. The flight itself passed in a blur of turbulence and terrible coffee. Ethan tried to review his presentation notes but couldn't focus, his mind jumping between worst-case scenarios. What if the prototype failed during the demonstration? What if he froze on stage? What if Victor was right and he was just a mechanic playing dress-up? He forced himself to close the laptop and stare out the window instead, watching the clouds drift past. Detroit appeared below like a grid of steel and concrete, the morning sun reflecting off the buildings downtown. The plane descended smoothly, and Ethan gathered his bags, following the stream of passengers toward baggage claim. Elena was waiting near the exit, unmistakable in a charcoal suit, her posture perfect even after what must have been an international flight. She spotted him and raised a hand. "Ethan? Good flight?" "Long," he said, shaking her hand. "When did you get in?" "Yesterday. I wanted to coordinate with the conference organizers, make sure everything was set." She gestured toward the exit. "Are cars waiting? The hotel isn't far." The driver loaded Ethan's bags while he kept the prototype case on his lap, unwilling to let it out of his sight. Elena sat across from him, scrolling through her phone with the efficiency of someone who lived half their life in transit. "The schedule's been finalized," she said without looking up. "You're presenting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Main stage, roughly 400 attendees expected." Ethan's stomach dropped. 400? It's one of the marquee sessions. Moretti's sponsorship guaranteed you a prime slot. She glanced at him. "Is that a problem?" "No, just trying to wrap my head around it." "You'll be fine. We've rehearsed this extensively." She returned to her phone. "Tonight there's a networking reception. Optional, but I'd recommend attending. Good opportunity to make connections before the presentation." The thought of making small talk with strangers made Ethan want to jump out of the moving car, but he nodded anyway. "Sure." The hotel was downtown, all glass and modern lines, the kind of place that charged $20 for a bottle of water from the minibar. Ethan checked in and took his bags to the room on the 14th floor, setting the prototype case on the desk with the same care he'd use handling nitroglycerin. He had 4 hours before the reception. He should sleep, or at least try to. Instead, he unpacked the prototype and ran through a diagnostic check, watching the numbers scroll across his laptop screen. Everything was nominal, perfect even. So why did he still feel like something was going to go wrong? At 7 p.m., he changed into the suit he'd bought specifically for this trip, charcoal gray, off the rack from a department store, the sleeves a half-inch too long. He'd never owned a suit before, never needed one. Now, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he barely recognized himself. The reception was in the hotel's ballroom, already crowded when Ethan arrived. Engineers, executives, journalists, all moving through the space with the easy confidence of people who belonged. Ethan grabbed a glass of water from the bar and found a spot near the wall, trying to look less conspicuous than he felt. "You must be Ethan Cole." He turned. A woman in her 50s extended her hand, her smile professional but warm. "I'm Rebecca Tran, senior editor at Automotive Engineering Monthly. Elena mentioned you'd be here." "Nice to meet you." Ethan shook her hand, trying not to grip too hard. "I saw the preview of your work in the conference materials. Very intriguing. Variable valve timing with adaptive response?" "That's right." "And you developed this independently?" "Yeah, just me and a lot of trial and error." Rebecca's eyebrows lifted slightly. "No institutional backing? No research grants?" "No." She pulled out her phone, tapping at the screen. "Would you be open to an interview? Nothing formal, just background for a piece I'm writing on grassroots innovation." Ethan hesitated. The idea of being quoted in a magazine felt surreal, but Elena had said visibility mattered. "Sure. When works for you?" "After your presentation tomorrow? That way I can include details about the live demonstration." "Oh, sounds good." Rebecca thanked him and moved on, leaving Ethan feeling slightly less invisible. Over the next hour, more people approached. Other presenters, industry veterans, a patent attorney who handed him a business card with gold embossing. The conversations blurred together, each one a variation on the same themes. Where are you from? What's your background? How did you develop this? He answered honestly, watching their reactions shift from interest to surprise to something that looked like skepticism. A mechanic from a town they'd never heard of, presenting alongside PhDs and corporate R&D teams. He could see them doing the math, trying to reconcile what they expected with what they saw. Around 8:30, Ethan spotted Victor Hale across the room. He was holding court near the windows, surrounded by a small group that hung on his every word. Victor wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Ethan's truck, his expression animated as he told some story that had his audience laughing. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Victor's smile didn't waver, but something changed in his posture. He said something to the group and started walking toward Ethan, weaving through the crowd with deliberate intent. Ethan's pulse kicked up. He set his water glass down and straightened, forcing himself not to look away. "Ethan Cole," Victor said when he was close enough. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Funny, I was invited." "So I heard. Moretti Automotive, right? That's quite a leap from changing oil in Greenfield." Victor's tone was friendly, conversational, but there was an edge underneath. "How'd you manage that?" "Hard work. Probably wouldn't understand." Victor's smile tightened. "Careful, you're out of your depth here." "Am I?" "These people aren't your customers bringing in their broken-down Hondas. They'll tear your work apart if it doesn't hold up." Victor leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "And between you and me, I've seen what you're presenting. It's derivative, nothing groundbreaking." Ethan felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "Then I guess tomorrow will be boring for you." "We'll see." Victor straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Good luck, Ethan. You're going to need it." He walked away before Ethan could respond, rejoining his group near the windows. Ethan stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, trying to slow his breathing. "Don't let him get to you." Elena appeared at his elbow, 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She offered one to Ethan, who shook his head. "I'm fine." "You're not, but you will be." She took a sip from her glass, her gaze following Victor across the room. "He's trying to rattle you. Classic intimidation tactic." "It's working." "Only if you let it." She turned to face him fully. "Ethan, I've been doing this long enough to recognize insecurity when I see it. Victor's scared of you." "Of me?" "Of what you represent. You're a threat to his worldview, that success requires pedigree, connections, institutional validation. You have none of those things, and yet here you are." She paused. "That terrifies men like him." Ethan looked at her, trying to gauge if she was just saying what he needed to hear. But Elena's expression was serious, almost stern. "Tomorrow, you're going to walk on that stage and show 400 people something they've never seen before. And it won't matter where you went to school or how much money you have. The work will speak for itself." She set her glass down on a nearby table. "Now go get some sleep. You have a long day ahead." Ethan nodded and made his way toward the elevators, feeling the weight of too many eyes on his back. In his room, he checked the prototype one more time, then collapsed on the bed fully clothed. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by anxiety dreams of standing on stage in front of a silent, judging crowd. When his alarm went off at 6 a.m., he felt like he'd been hit by a truck. The morning sessions passed in a haze. Ethan sat through presentations on electric vehicle infrastructure and autonomous driving systems, absorbing almost nothing. His mind kept jumping ahead to 2 p.m., to the moment when he'd have to stand up and prove he belonged. At noon, Elena found him in the conference center's cafe, staring at a sandwich he hadn't touched. "How are you holding up?" "Fine." "You're a terrible liar." She sat across from him. "We have 90 minutes. Let's run through the presentation one more time." They found an empty breakout room and set up the laptop. Ethan went through his slides, stumbling over words he'd rehearsed 100 times. Elena stopped him twice, making him repeat sections until they sounded natural instead of memorized. "You're overthinking it," she said. "Just talk to them like you talked to me that first video call. Explain what you built and why it matters." What if they don't care? Then they're idiots. She closed the laptop. But they will care. Trust me. At 1:30, they made their way to the main ballroom. The stage was bigger than Ethan had imagined, with massive screens on either side and professional lighting that made everything look like a TED Talk. Rows of seats filled the space, already starting to populate with attendees. A conference organizer fitted Ethan with a wireless microphone, the battery pack clipped to his belt. You'll have 30 minutes total, 20 for the presentation, 10 for Q&A. There's a confidence monitor at your feet showing your slides. Any questions? Ethan shook his head, not trusting his voice. Elena squeezed his shoulder. You've got this. He climbed the side stairs to the stage and stood in the wings, watching the current presenter wrap up a talk on carbon fiber manufacturing. The applause was polite but restrained. Then the MC took the stage, a woman in a red blazer with the kind of voice that could fill a stadium. Our next presenter is someone I'm particularly excited to introduce. He's not from a major research institution or a Fortune 500 company. He's a self-taught engineer from a small town in the Midwest who's developed something that has our friends at Moretti Automotive very excited. Please welcome Ethan Cole. The applause started and Ethan walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. He couldn't see the audience beyond the first few rows, which was probably a mercy. He reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. His mind went completely blank. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, he just stood there, frozen. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and expectant. Someone coughed. He heard a chair creak. Then he saw Elena in the front row, her expression calm and steady, and something clicked. I'm a mechanic, he started, his voice rough. He cleared his throat. That's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Fixing cars, replacing parts, keeping other people's machines running, and for a long time I thought that's all I was good for. He clicked to the next slide, a photo of his garage, the Coles Auto Repair sign visible above the door. But at night, after my daughter went to bed, I'd sit at my kitchen table and sketch. Ideas for things that could be better, faster, more efficient. I didn't have access to CAD software or a research lab. Just pencil and paper and a lot of time to think. Another click. The original sketch from his notebook, the one Victor had posted online. This is a variable valve timing system with adaptive response. The basic concept isn't new. VVT has been around for decades. But the implementation is different. Instead of fixed timing adjustments, this system uses real-time data to optimize valve operation for current driving conditions. Acceleration, cruising, deceleration, each gets a different timing profile. He walked away from the podium, feeling more confident now that he was talking about the work instead of himself. The challenge was making it responsive enough to adjust on the fly without sacrificing reliability. Traditional VVT systems use hydraulic actuators, which are slow. I'm using electromagnetic solenoids paired with a predictive algorithm that anticipates driver input based on throttle position and engine load. Click. A technical schematic appeared showing the system's components. The result is a 23% improvement in fuel efficiency during mixed driving, with a corresponding increase in power output when needed. And because the system is modular, it can be retrofitted to existing engines without major modifications. He could feel the room's attention sharpening, the initial skepticism giving way to actual interest. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds good on paper, but does it actually work? He signaled to the tech crew, and they wheeled out a stand holding the prototype. Ethan had spent the morning getting it ready, connecting the sensors to a laptop that would display the real-time data. This is a working prototype, built in collaboration with Moretti Automotive's engineering team. We're going to run a simulated driving cycle. You'll see the valve timing adjust in real time as the load changes. He started the sequence and the screens lit up with data. Graphs showing valve position, timing offsets, fuel flow, power output. The numbers shifted smoothly as the simulation moved through acceleration, steady-state cruising, and deceleration. The room was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Focused, engaged. Ethan talked through what they were seeing, pointing out the moments when the system adjusted, explaining why those adjustments mattered. He'd done this demonstration dozens of times in his garage, but never with an audience, never with stakes this high. The simulation completed. The final numbers appeared on screen. Fuel efficiency up 23.7%, Power output increased by 18% during acceleration. Ethan turned back to the audience. That's what I wanted to show you. A system that doesn't just work in theory, but works in practice. Something that could change how we think about engine efficiency. He paused, looking out at the crowd. I know I'm not what you expected. I don't have a PhD, I didn't go to MIT or Stanford, but I spent 10 years learning engines from the inside out, fixing every possible thing that could go wrong, understanding the gap between design and reality. And that's worth something. The applause started before he finished the sentence, building from a few scattered claps to something that filled the entire ballroom. People were standing, first a few in the front rows, then more, until half the audience was on their feet. Ethan stood there, stunned, as the sound washed over him. He looked for Elena and found her in the front row, her expression unreadable, but her hands moving in steady applause. The MC returned to the stage. We have time for questions. Hands shot up across the room. The MC pointed to a man in the third row. Dr. Chen, Stanford Mechanical Engineering. Your timing algorithm? Is it proprietary, or are you planning to publish the methodology? Ethan gripped the podium. We're still working out the details, but the goal is to make the core principles accessible. I want other engineers to build on this, not just keep it locked away. Another hand. A woman this time, her badge identifying her as from a major automotive manufacturer. The durability testing. How many cycles have you run? 50,000 simulated, about 8,000 real-world equivalent. We've seen less than 2% degradation in response time. More questions came, each one more technical than the last. Ethan answered what he could, admitted when he didn't know, promised to follow up on the details. The 10-minute Q&A stretched to 15 before the MC finally cut it off. As Ethan walked off stage, people rushed to meet him. Business cards were thrust into his hands, requests for follow-up meetings, offers to discuss licensing and partnership. Elena appeared at his side like a bodyguard, steering him through the crowd. You need to breathe, she said, guiding him toward a quiet corridor. Did that just happen? It did, and it went better than I expected. She allowed herself a small smile. You were honest. People respond to that. Ethan leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. I thought I was going to pass out up there. But you didn't. You pushed through. She checked her phone. Rebecca Tran wants that interview, and you have 3 requests for dinner meetings tonight. I can't. You can, and you will. This is the momentum we need. She softened slightly. But take an hour first. Decompress. I'll handle the immediate requests. Ethan nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. He made his way back to his hotel room and collapsed on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Mrs. Patterson just showed me the live stream. Dad, you killed it. He smiled, typing back, didn't throw up. That's a win. More than a win. I'm so proud of you. He set the phone down and closed his eyes, letting the weight of the last hour settle over him. He'd done it. Actually done it. Stood on that stage and proved he was more than what people assumed. But even as relief flooded through him, he couldn't shake the image of Victor's face in the crowd, watching with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. The interview with Rebecca Tran happened in the hotel bar, Ethan nursing a ginger ale while she recorded on her phone. She asked about his background, his process, what came next. He answered as honestly as he could, still half convinced this was all some elaborate dream. One last question, Rebecca said. Victor Hale's been vocal about his skepticism regarding your work. Any response to that? Ethan took a sip of his drink, choosing his words carefully. Victor's entitled to his opinion, but I'd rather let the results speak for themselves. Diplomatic. Practical. She smiled and stopped the recording. This is going to be a great piece. I'll send you a draft before publication. After she left, Ethan sat alone at the bar, watching the conference attendees move through the lobby. Some glanced his way, recognition flickering across their faces. A few nodded. One stopped to shake his hand and say the presentation was inspiring. It felt unreal. Around 8 p.m., Elena found him and dragged him to a dinner with representatives from 2 automotive suppliers and a venture capital firm. The conversation was dense with technical jargon and business terms Ethan barely understood, but he held his own, answering questions about scalability and manufacturing costs. By the time he got back to his room, it was past midnight. He checked his email and found it flooded: interview requests, partnership inquiries, an offer from a university to guest lecture. He scrolled through them in disbelief, then closed the laptop before the anxiety could creep back in. Tomorrow was the final day of the conference. Then he'd fly home, back to the garage and the life he'd put on hold. But something had shifted. He could feel it, undeniable and irreversible. He was no longer just a mechanic from Greenfield. He was someone people were starting to take seriously. The final day of the conference started with Ethan's phone ringing at 7 a.m. He grabbed it off the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. Hello? Mister? Cole, this is David Brennan from TechCore Ventures. I attended your presentation yesterday and I'd like to discuss potential investment opportunities. Do you have time for breakfast? Ethan sat up, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, sure, when? 20 minutes? Hotel restaurant? I'll be there. He hung up and stared at the phone, trying to process what just happened. Investment opportunities. 3 words he'd never expected to hear directed at him. He showered fast, threw on the same suit from yesterday, and made it downstairs with 2 minutes to spare. David Brennan was already at a corner table, mid-40s with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of relaxed posture that came from having serious money. Ethan, thanks for making time. They shook hands and sat. I'll get straight to it. Your presentation was the best thing I've seen at this conference in 5 years. The tech is solid, the demonstration was flawless, and you've got a compelling story. That's a rare combination. Thank you. I want to invest, early-stage partnership, help you scale production, navigate patents, connect you with manufacturers. David leaned forward. What are you looking for? Ethan's mind raced. He hadn't thought this far ahead. Yesterday was about surviving the presentation. Now people wanted to give him money? I'm not sure yet, he said honestly. This is all pretty new. Fair enough, but here's my advice. Strike while the moment's hot. You've got attention right now. Use it. David slid a business card across the table. Call me when you're ready to talk numbers. I think we could do something special together. Breakfast arrived, but Ethan barely tasted it. David spent the next 40 minutes outlining possibilities, production scaling, market positioning, intellectual property strategy. It was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. When they finished, Ethan headed back to his room to find Elena waiting in the hallway. We have a problem, she said. His stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Victor Hale gave an interview to Automotive News this morning. It's already posted online. She handed him her phone. The headline read, Industry Veteran Questions Credentials of Breakout Conference Presenter. Ethan scrolled through the article, his jaw tightening with every paragraph. Victor had been careful. He didn't directly attack the technology, just raised questions about Ethan's qualifications, his lack of formal education, whether the work was truly original or derivative of existing research. The subtext was clear. Ethan didn't belong, and his success was a fluke. He's trying to undermine you, Elena said. Get ahead of the narrative before you can capitalize on yesterday's momentum. So what do I do? We respond, strategically. She took her phone back. Rebecca Tran's piece goes live in 2 hours. It's positive, thorough, includes quotes from conference attendees praising your work. That helps. But we need more. Like what? A partnership announcement. Something concrete that shows you're not just a one-hit wonder. She paused. Moretti Automotive is prepared to offer you a formal collaboration agreement. Shared patent rights, production support, access to our facilities. We finalize it today. Announce it tomorrow. That sends a message. Ethan stared at her. You're serious? Completely. I've already discussed it with our board. They're on board. What's the catch? Elena's expression didn't change. No catch. We want to work with you because you're good at this. And because partnering with you raises our profile too. It's mutually beneficial. He thought about it, trying to see the angles he might be missing, but Elena had been straight with him from the beginning. If she said it was a good deal, he trusted her. Okay, let's do it. Good. Our legal team will have the paperwork ready this afternoon. She glanced at her watch. You have a panel discussion at 11. Introduction to Emerging Innovators. It's informal, but people will be watching. The panel was in a smaller conference room, maybe 100 seats. Ethan sat alongside three other presenters, a PhD student from Carnegie Mellon working on battery technology, a founder of a sensor startup, and a researcher from a national lab. The moderator asked standard questions about innovation, challenges, future directions. Ethan tried to sound coherent, but his mind kept drifting to Victor's interview. During the Q&A, someone in the back row raised their hand. This question is for Ethan. There's been some discussion online about your background. How do you respond to critics who say you lack the formal qualifications for this kind of work? Ethan felt every eye in the room turn toward him. The moderator looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to intervene but wasn't sure how. I think formal qualifications matter, Ethan said slowly. Education is important, but it's not the only path to understanding something. I've spent 10 years working with engines, seeing what breaks and why, learning from mistakes in a way you can't get from a textbook. He paused. I'm not saying my way is better. I'm just saying it's different, and maybe there's value in that. The room was quiet for a beat, then someone started clapping. It spread, not the standing ovation from yesterday, but something that felt more genuine. The moderator moved to the next question, and Ethan exhaled. After the panel, he was cornered by a journalist from a tech blog who wanted to know his thoughts on Victor's comments. Ethan kept his answers short, refusing to take the bait. He'd learned that much already. Don't give them a controversy to write about. Around 1 p.m., he met Elena and Moretti's legal team in a hotel conference room. The partnership agreement was dense, full of terms like intellectual property licensing and revenue sharing structures. Ethan read through it twice, asked questions about the parts he didn't understand, and finally signed. Congratulations, Elena said, shaking his hand. You're now officially a partner of Moretti Automotive. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, Ethan just felt tired. That evening, there was a closing reception, less formal than the opening night, more self-congratulatory. Ethan made an appearance, nursing a drink and fielding questions from people who'd seen his presentation. Everyone wanted to know what was next, like he had some master plan instead of just trying to survive each day. He was about to leave when he spotted Victor near the bar, alone for once. Their eyes met, and Victor walked over, his expression unreadable. Hell of a presentation, Victor said. Ethan waited for the other shoe to drop. I mean it. You surprised me. Victor took a sip of his whiskey. I didn't think you had it in you. Thanks, I think. But you're making a mistake with Moretti. How's that? They're using you, building their brand on your story. Small-town mechanic makes good. You're a marketing angle to them, nothing more. Victor's tone was almost sympathetic now, which somehow made it worse. You should have held out for better terms. You don't know what terms I got. I know how these things work. You're the talent. They're the money. Guess who wins in the long run? Ethan set his drink down. Why do you care? I don't. Not really. Victor shrugged. But I've been in this industry 30 years. I've seen guys like you come through, full of potential, short on experience. Most of them crash and burn because they don't understand the game. Maybe I'm not playing the same game. Everyone's playing the same game, Ethan. Some people just lie to themselves about it. Victor finished his whiskey and set the glass on a passing tray. Enjoy the moment while it lasts. It won't. He walked away before Ethan could respond. Ethan stood there, Victor's words echoing in his head. Was he right? Was Moretti just using him? Elena had been nothing but supportive, but she was also protecting her company's interests. That was her job. He shook his head and headed for the elevators. He was overthinking this. Victor was trying to get in his head, plant doubt. Classic manipulation, but the doubt was there now, whether Ethan wanted it or not. The flight home the next morning was delayed by 2 hours, which meant Ethan spent most of it in the terminal reading coverage of the conference. Rebecca Tran's article was everything Elena promised, thorough, balanced, highlighting Ethan's work without sensationalizing his background. The comments section was mixed, but mostly positive. Victor's interview was still circulating too, though the responses were harsher than Ethan expected. People calling Victor out for gatekeeping, for trying to tear down someone who'd proven themselves. A few engineers weighed in, defending Ethan's methodology and pointing out flaws in Victor's critique. It was strange, having strangers argue about him online. Lily picked him up at the airport, driving his truck because she'd just gotten her license 2 months ago and took every opportunity to practice. She hugged him tight in the parking lot, bouncing on her toes. "You're famous, Mrs. Patterson showed me like 6 different articles about you." "I'm not famous. I gave one presentation." "One amazing presentation. Did you see the comments on the live stream? People were losing their minds." They climbed into the truck, Lily adjusting the mirrors with exaggerated care. Ethan buckled in and tried not to think about the fact that his 16-year-old daughter was driving him home. "How was school?" "Boring. Everyone wanted to talk about you instead of actually learning anything." She pulled out of the parking spot, her movements careful and deliberate. "Mrs. Patterson said a reporter called the house looking for you." "What'd she tell them?" "That you weren't available. She took a message, though." They drove in silence for a few minutes, Lily concentrating on merging onto the highway. When they were settled in the right lane, she glanced at him. "Are things going to change now?" "I don't know, maybe." "Good change or bad change?" Ethan thought about David Brennan's offer, Elena's partnership agreement, Victor's warnings. "Hopefully good, but it's complicated." "Things are always complicated with you." "Thanks, kid." She grinned. "I'm just saying, you deserve this, Dad. Whatever happens next, you earned it." They got home around 6 p.m. The garage looked exactly as Ethan had left it. Mr. Henley's Ford still in the corner, the workbench cluttered with tools, the calendar still 3 months out of date. He stood in the doorway, feeling like he'd been gone for years instead of days. His phone rang. "Elena." "Did you land safely?" "Yeah, just got home." "Good. I wanted to give you a heads up. The partnership announcement is going out tomorrow morning. We're doing a press release, coordinated social media, the works. Expect more interview requests." "Great." You don't sound excited." "I am. Just processing everything." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Victor got to you, didn't he?" "What makes you say that?" "Because I know how he operates. He plants doubt, makes you question yourself right when you should be celebrating." Her voice was firm. "Don't let him. You've earned this, Ethan. The work speaks for itself." "Yeah, I know." "Do you?" He didn't answer right away. "I'm trying to. That's all anyone can do." She paused. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy." After she hung up, Ethan walked into the garage and flipped on the lights. The fluorescent tubes flickered to life, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. He should clean up, get back to work on the Ford, return to normal life. Instead, he sat at the workbench and opened his notebook, flipping through pages of sketches and ideas. Somewhere in here was the next project, the next thing that would keep his mind occupied. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to hide in the work. He wanted to be present, to figure out what came next instead of just surviving. His phone buzzed again. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Saw your presentation online, impressive work. Would like to discuss a potential collaboration." Marcus Webb, Velocity Systems. Ethan stared at the message, then at the dozen others that had come in while he was in the air. Offers, opportunities, people who wanted a piece of what he'd built. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something he'd been too afraid to hope for. The partnership announcement went live at 9 a.m. the next day. Ethan's phone exploded with notifications, news sites picking up the story, social media reactions, emails from people he hadn't heard from in years. By noon, he'd done 3 phone interviews and declined 5 more. Rebecca Tran's article had positioned him as an underdog success story, and the press ran with it. Small-town mechanic partners with prestigious European firm. Self-taught engineer proves critics wrong. The narrative was almost too perfect, which made Ethan uncomfortable. Real life wasn't this clean. Around 2 p.m., his phone rang with a New York area code. "Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer Reese from the National Engineering Society. We'd like to invite you to speak at our annual symposium in September. It's one of the premier events in the industry." Ethan stopped her. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to think about it." "Of course. We can send formal details if that helps." After he hung up, Lily appeared in the garage doorway. "Was that another one?" "Yeah. You know you're going to have to start saying yes to some of these, right?" "I know." She walked over and sat on the stool, watching him organize tools that didn't need organizing. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Dad." He set down the wrench he'd been holding. I don't know if I can do this. All of it. The speaking, the partnerships, being the guy everyone wants a piece of. I'm a mechanic, Lily. I fix things. I don't. He gestured vaguely. I don't do whatever this is. You're not just a mechanic. You never were. She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And yeah, this is scary, but you can't go back to how things were. That door's closed. Maybe I don't want it closed. Yes, you do. You're just afraid of what's on the other side. Ethan looked at his daughter, wondering when she'd gotten so perceptive. When did you grow up? I've been paying attention. She stood and headed back toward the apartment. Mrs. Patterson made pot roast. Come eat before it gets cold. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He'd been avoiding Victor's interview, but curiosity finally won. He read through it slowly, analyzing each critique. Most of it was professional jealousy dressed up as concern, but some points weren't entirely wrong. Ethan didn't have the institutional knowledge that came from formal education. He'd learned through trial and error, which meant there were gaps, things he'd missed or misunderstood. He opened a new browser tab and started researching advanced engineering courses. MIT had an open courseware program. Stanford offered online certificates. Maybe he could fill in those gaps, prove that he belonged not just through one successful prototype, but through sustained expertise. His phone buzzed. Another message, this one from Elena. Victor's interview is getting pushback. Multiple engineers have published responses defending your work. The narrative is shifting. Ethan clicked the link she sent. An opinion piece from a professor at Georgia Tech, systematically dismantling Victor's criticisms. Another from an industry veteran who called out the gatekeeping mentality. A third from someone who'd worked with Victor and described him as threatened by genuine innovation. It felt vindicating and uncomfortable at the same time. Ethan hadn't asked for people to fight his battles, but they were doing it anyway. Over the next week, the attention gradually subsided. The news cycle moved on to other stories, other innovations. Ethan returned to the garage, reopening for business and working through the backlog of repairs. Mr. Henley picked up his Ford with apologies for the delay, waving off Ethan's explanation about the conference. I saw you on the news, Henley said, counting out bills. Made us proud, Ethan. Whole town's talking about it. It was true. People stopped by just to congratulate him, to say they'd always known he was smart, even though most of them had never given him a second thought before. The attention was well-meaning but exhausting. Then, 3 weeks after Detroit, Ethan got a call from Victor Hale. We need to talk, Victor said without preamble. About what? Not over the phone. Can you meet me in Chicago? I'll cover travel. Why would I do that? Because I have something you want. Victor's tone was different now, less combative, almost conciliatory. Just hear me out. One conversation. Ethan should have said no, should have hung up and blocked the number, but curiosity got the better of him. When? Tomorrow. I'll send details. The meeting was in a conference room at a hotel near O'Hare. Victor was already there when Ethan arrived, sitting at a table with a folder in front of him. Thanks for coming, Victor said, gesturing to a chair. Ethan sat but didn't speak. Victor opened the folder and slid a document across the table. This is a proposed partnership between Hale Industries and your operation. We'd provide manufacturing capacity, distribution networks, capital investment. In exchange, we'd take a 40% stake in your intellectual property. Ethan stared at the document without touching it. You spent the last month trying to tear me down and now you want a partner? I was wrong. Victor said it flatly like he was reading from a script. Your work is solid, better than I gave you credit for, and I'm practical enough to recognize value when I see it. What changed? The response to your presentation, the Moretti deal, the fact that you're about to become a major player in this industry whether I like it or not. Victor leaned back. I'd rather work with you than against you. 40% is a lot. It's fair for what we're offering. Ethan picked up the document, skimming through it. The terms were generous, more than what Moretti had offered in some ways, but something felt off. I need to think about it. Of course. Take a week. But Ethan, Victor's expression was serious now. This is a limited time offer. You walk away, there's no coming back. Ethan stood, tucking the document under his arm. I'll let you know. On the flight back, he read through Victor's proposal 3 times. The numbers were impressive, the resources even more so. But every instinct told him this was a trap, that Victor was trying to control him through partnership instead of criticism. He called Elena from the airport. Victor made me an offer. What kind of offer? He outlined the terms. Elena was silent for a long moment. It's a poison pill, she said finally. He's offering you resources you don't actually need in exchange for control over your IP. Once he has that 40%, he can block development, stall production, tie you up in legal disputes. You'd be stuck. That's what I thought. So why are you even considering it? I'm not. I just wanted to confirm I wasn't missing something. You're not. Turn him down. Ethan hung up and immediately called Victor. I'm out. Victor was quiet for a beat. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. You'll regret this, Ethan. I'll take my chances. He ended the call and blocked the number. When he got home, Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up as he walked in. How'd it go? I told him no. Good. She went back to her textbook. He's a jerk anyway. Ethan smiled and sat across from her. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. 2 months after turning down Victor's offer, Ethan stood in front of the garage at 5 in the morning, watching a construction crew unload equipment. The expansion had been Elena's idea, turn the empty lot next door into a proper workshop, something that could handle prototype development alongside the regular repair work. Moretti was funding half of it, with the understanding that Ethan would use the space for their collaborative projects. The crew foreman walked over, clipboard in hand. We'll have the foundation poured by end of week. You picked a good contractor. Ethan nodded, still trying to wrap his head around the fact that this was happening. 6 months ago, he'd been scraping by, worried about making rent. Now he was expanding. Dad, you're going to freeze out here. He turned. Lily stood in the doorway, wrapped in her winter coat, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed him one and stood beside him, both of them watching the crew work in the pre-dawn darkness. Feels weird, Ethan said. Good weird or bad weird? I don't know yet. They drank their coffee in silence until Lily had to leave for school. After she was gone, Ethan went inside and started his day the way he always did, checking the schedule, returning calls, getting his hands dirty with actual work. The prototype had brought opportunities, but it hadn't changed what he was at his core. He still needed to fix things, to solve problems with his hands instead of just his head. Around 10 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number, but he'd stopped ignoring those. Mr. Cole, this is Amanda Chen from Velocity Systems. We spoke briefly after your conference presentation. I'm calling to follow up on a potential collaboration. Ethan remembered her, sharp, direct, running a mid-sized firm that specialized in performance upgrades. What kind of collaboration? We want to license your valve timing system for our racing division. We'd handle manufacturing and distribution. You'd retain design authority and receive royalties. I'm sending over a proposal today, but I wanted to gauge your interest first. I'm interested. Send it over. Excellent. One more thing. We're hosting a showcase event next month in Indianapolis. Industry buyers, team owners, press. Would you be willing to present? Ethan almost laughed. 3 months ago, the thought of another presentation would have terrified him. Now it just felt like part of the job. Yeah, I can do that. After he hung up, Elena called. Did Velocity reach out? Just got off the phone with them. Good. I've been talking with Amanda for weeks. The racing application is perfect. High visibility, performance-focused audience. It'll position your work in a new market. She paused. How are you feeling about everything? Honestly, overwhelmed, but in a good way, I think. That's normal. You're building something now, Ethan, not just fixing other people's problems. Her tone softened slightly. Speaking of which, I'll be in the States next month. Thought I'd visit Greenfield, see the expansion progress. You don't need to do that. I want to. Besides, we need to discuss the next phase, scaling production, refining the design for mass manufacturing. Better to do that in person. They talked through logistics for a few more minutes before she had to go. Ethan set the phone down and looked around the garage. The place was a mess. Parts scattered across workbenches, coffee cups forgotten in corners, The calendar finally updated, but already marked with so many appointments he could barely track them all. It was chaos, but it was his chaos. The weeks blurred together after that. Ethan split his time between the garage, the expansion project, and preparing for the Indianapolis showcase. Lily started receiving acceptance letters from colleges, each one a reminder that she'd be gone in less than a year. The scholarship money still wasn't enough, but between the Moretti partnership and the Velocity licensing deal, Ethan could actually afford to help now. That realization hit him one night while reviewing financial projections Elena had sent. He could pay for Lily's education, all of it. The thing he'd been fighting for 10 years was suddenly within reach, and he didn't know how to process that. "Dad, you're staring at your laptop like it insulted you." He looked up. Lily was leaning against the doorframe, still in her pajamas, even though it was nearly noon on a Saturday. "Just thinking." "About?" "College. Money. The fact that we might actually be okay." She walked over and sat across from him. "We've always been okay." "You know what I mean." "Yeah, I do." She was quiet for a moment. "It's weird, right? Things actually working out." "Very weird," she smiled. "Well, get used to it, because I'm going to MIT and you're paying for it." Ethan's heart stopped. "MIT accepted you?" "Got the letter yesterday. Full ride if we can cover room and board." She tried to sound casual, but her eyes were bright. "I didn't want to tell you until I knew we could afford it." He stood and hugged her, hard enough that she protested. "We can afford it. Whatever it takes." "I know. That's why I'm telling you now." That evening, Ethan called Elena to share the news. She congratulated him, then steered the conversation back to business. She'd be arriving in Greenfield the following week, staying at the local inn for a few days. They'd finalize production plans and visit a potential manufacturing partner 2 hours north. When she arrived, it was late afternoon, her rental car pulling up just as Ethan was closing the garage for the day. She stepped out looking slightly rumpled from travel, her usual professional demeanor softened by jet lag. "Welcome to Greenfield," Ethan said. She looked around at the quiet street, the flickering garage sign, the half-built expansion next door. "It's smaller than I imagined." "Most people say that." "I meant it as a compliment. Sometimes smaller is better." She grabbed her bag from the trunk. "Show me what you've been working on." They spent the next hour walking through their garage and the new workshop space. Elena asked detailed questions about layout, workflow, equipment needs. She took notes on her phone, occasionally stopping to examine a tool or sketch. By the time they finished, the sun was setting. "You've built something good here," she said. "Not just the business. The whole thing, the way you work, the community support, the integrity of it. That matters." "Thanks." "I mean it. I've worked with brilliant engineers who were terrible people. You're not that." She checked her watch. "Is there somewhere decent to eat in this town?" Define decent. Anywhere that serves food and doesn't give me food poisoning. They ended up at the diner on Main Street, sitting in a booth near the back. The waitress knew Ethan by name and brought coffee without asking. Elena ordered the meatloaf, raising an eyebrow when it arrived exactly as mediocre as Ethan had warned. "So," she said, cutting into the dense brown mass on her plate, "Lily got into MIT. How'd you know?" "You mentioned it on our call. Congratulations, by the way. That's a huge accomplishment." "For her, yeah. For both of you. She didn't get there alone." Elena took a bite, made a face, and set down her fork. "This is truly terrible." "I told you." "You did." "I chose not to listen." She pushed the plate aside and focused on her coffee instead. "What happens after she leaves for school?" "I keep working, keep building." "And that's enough?" Ethan looked at her. "What else would there be?" Elena didn't answer right away. She turned her coffee cup in slow circles, her expression thoughtful. "I've been doing this job for 12 years, building things, solving problems, chasing the next innovation. And somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started. It became about the work instead of the life the work was supposed to support." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you have a chance to do it differently, to build something without losing yourself in the process." She met his eyes. "Don't make my mistakes, Ethan." They talked until the diner closed, conversations drifting from business to personal and back again. Elena told him about growing up in Turin, her father's machine shop, the scholarship that brought her to the States for graduate school. Ethan shared stories about Sarah, about the early days when they'd been broke and hopeful, before the diagnosis changed everything. It was the most honest conversation he'd had with anyone since Sarah died. When they left, Elena paused outside the diner. "Thank you for tonight. I needed this." Just dinner at a mediocre diner. It was more than that. She smiled, genuine and unguarded. "See you tomorrow?" "Yeah, tomorrow." The manufacturing visit went well. The facility was impressive, clean, organized, staffed by people who actually understood what they were building. Elena negotiated terms while Ethan focused on technical specifications, both of them working in the kind of rhythm that comes from mutual respect rather than hierarchy. On the drive back, Elena brought up Victor. "Have you heard from him since you turned down his offer?" "No," radio silence. "That won't last." Her hands were steady on the wheel. "Men like Victor don't handle rejection well. He'll try something else eventually." "Let him. I'm not interested." "Good. Just be prepared." Elena's prediction came true 2 weeks later. Ethan was in the new workshop testing a revised prototype when he got an email from Victor. The subject line read, "Final offer." He almost deleted it unread, but curiosity won again. The email was brief. Victor had filed a patent challenge claiming Ethan's valve timing system infringed on existing Hale Industries intellectual property. It was baseless. Elena's legal team had done exhaustive prior art searches, but it would tie up the patents in litigation for months, maybe years, unless Ethan wanted to settle. Victor offered to drop the challenge in exchange for a licensing agreement that would give Hale Industries exclusive manufacturing rights. Ethan read it twice, feeling his jaw tighten. This was extortion dressed up as business negotiation. He forwarded the email to Elena and called her immediately. "I saw it," she said before he could speak. "Our lawyers are already drafting a response." "Can he actually do this?" "File the challenge? Yes. Win it? No. But he knows that's not the point. He's trying to force your hand, make you choose between fighting a long legal battle or accepting his terms." "So what do we do?" "We fight, publicly." Elena's voice was firm. "I'm tired of playing defense with this man. It's time to go on offense." The counterattack was surgical. Moretti's PR team released a statement condemning Victor's patent challenge as a bad faith attempt to stifle innovation. Rebecca Tran published a follow-up piece on the pattern of established industry figures blocking emerging talent. 3 engineers who'd worked under Victor at Hale Industries came forward with stories of him stealing credit for their work. Within a week, the narrative had shifted completely. Victor wasn't the concerned industry veteran anymore. He was the villain trying to crush competition. The patent challenge was withdrawn quietly, with no public statement from Hale Industries. But everyone knew what had happened. Ethan should have felt triumphant. Instead, he just felt tired of fighting, of defending himself, of proving he deserved to exist in this space. Elena must have sensed it because she called that evening. "You did good work," she said. "Victor won't bother you again." "Yeah." "You don't sound convinced." "I'm just ready for this to be over. All of it. The politics, the fighting, the constant need to justify myself. That part never really ends. The stage just changes." She paused. "But it gets easier. You build credibility, allies, a body of work that speaks louder than critics. You're already doing that." "Doesn't feel like it." "Because you're in the middle of it. Trust me, from where I'm standing, you're winning." The Indianapolis showcase happened on a cold Saturday in November. Ethan drove down with the latest prototype packed carefully in the truck bed, Lily riding shotgun and complaining about his choice of music. "Nobody listens to classic rock anymore, Dad." "I do. Therefore, somebody does." "You don't count." They arrived at the venue early, giving Ethan time to set up before the crowds arrived. The showcase was smaller than the Detroit conference, more focused. Racing teams, performance shops, journalists who specialized in motorsports. Exactly the audience Velocity had promised. Amanda Chen found him during setup. "Ready for this?" "As I'll ever be." "Good. We've got team owners from 3 major circuits here, plus buyers from aftermarket manufacturers. If this goes well, you're looking at serious production volume." The presentation went smoothly. Ethan had done this enough times now that the nerves were manageable, the rhythm familiar. He explained the technology, demonstrated the prototype, answered technical questions with the kind of confidence that came from actually understanding what he'd built. Afterward, people crowded around the display, examining the prototype, asking about production timelines and pricing. Ethan fielded questions while Lily watched from the side, clearly proud even if she'd never admit it. A man in his 60s approached, wearing a racing team jacket. "Impressive work. I'm Jack Morrison, chief engineer for Apex Racing. We'd like to talk about integrating this into our cars for next season." They exchanged contact information, Jack promising to follow up with formal specifications. As he walked away, Lily appeared at Ethan's elbow. "That was the Jack Morrison, like legendary Jack Morrison." "I know." "And he wants to work with you." "Apparently." She shook her head. "This is so weird." On the drive home, Ethan's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Orders, inquiries, interview requests. Velocity had been right. The racing world was taking notice. "You're going to need to hire people," Lily said, scrolling through his emails. "I know. And probably an accountant, maybe a lawyer too." "I know. And someone to manage all these calls because you're terrible at it." "Lily, I'm just saying, you can't do this alone anymore." She was right, of course. The one-man operation wasn't sustainable. Ethan needed a team, infrastructure, systems that didn't rely on him remembering everything. Back in Greenfield, he started making changes. He hired 2 mechanics to handle the regular repair work, freeing up his time for prototype development. He brought in an office manager to handle scheduling and invoicing. He even hired a part-time engineering student from the community college to help with CAD work and testing. The garage transformed from a barely functional business into something that actually ran properly. It was uncomfortable at first, delegating tasks he'd always done himself. But it worked. Elena visited again in December, this time staying for a full week. They toured the completed expansion, finalized production specifications with Velocity, and met with Moretti's manufacturing partners via video call. But they also spent time outside the workshop, dinner at the Mediocre Diner, a walk through Greenfield's small downtown, coffee in Ethan's kitchen while Lily studied at the table. It felt natural, easy in a way that surprised Ethan. Elena fit into his world without trying to change it, and he found himself looking forward to their conversations as much as the business they accomplished. On her last night, they sat in the new workshop after everyone else had gone home. Elena was reviewing technical drawings while Ethan cleaned up, both of them comfortable in the quiet. "I've been thinking," Elena said without looking up. "Moretti's opening a North American office. We need someone to run it, someone who understands both the technical side and the practical realities of working in this market." Ethan set down the tools he'd been organizing. "You offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. Real partnership, not just licensing agreements and contract work." She finally looked up. "You'd have autonomy, resources, and a voice in how we develop technology for this region. And you could stay here, in Greenfield. We'd build the office around you." "That's a big change." "It is, but it's the right one, I think. For both of us." She stood, walking over to where he was standing. "You've proven you can innovate. Now let's prove you can scale it." Ethan thought about everything that had happened in the last 6 months. The conference, the partnerships, the fights, and victories. He'd started this journey just trying to survive, to keep Lily fed and the garage open. Now he was being offered something he'd never imagined. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, take your time." Elena smiled. "But not too much time. I'm impatient." After she left for the airport the next morning, Ethan walked through the expanded garage, taking in everything he'd built. The new equipment, the organized workspace, the calendar filled with projects that actually mattered. This was his, built from nothing but stubbornness and sketches in a notebook, and now he had a chance to make it something even bigger. He called Lily down from the apartment. "Elena offered me a partnership, running Moretti's North American operations. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. What do you think?" She looked around the workshop, then back at him. "I think you've spent 10 years playing it safe because you were scared of losing what little we had. And I think it's time to stop being scared." "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You're just finally listening." She hugged him quickly. "Take the job, Dad." You've earned it. That evening, Ethan called Elena. I'm in. He could hear the smile in her voice. Good. Let's build something incredible. The next few months were a controlled chaos of logistics and planning. Moretti's North American office took shape in a renovated building on the edge of Greenfield. Not big by corporate standards, but substantial enough to signal permanence. Ethan hired engineers, technicians, administrative staff. The garage became a satellite operation, with his original mechanics running the day-to-day repairs, while Ethan focused on development. Lily graduated high school in May, top of her class, already packed for MIT's summer orientation. The ceremony was in the high school gym, same place where Ethan had graduated 15 years earlier. He watched his daughter walk across the stage, accepting her diploma and a handful of academic awards, and felt something break open in his chest. Sarah should have been here for this, should have seen what their daughter had become. After the ceremony, Lily found him in the parking lot, still in her cap and gown. You okay? Yeah, just proud. You're crying. Allergies. She hugged him, and they stood there for a long time while families streamed past around them. 2 weeks later, Ethan drove Lily to Boston for orientation. They made a weekend of it, touring campus, setting up her dorm room, arguing about whether she needed a mini fridge. When it was time to leave, Ethan found himself stalling, inventing reasons to stay just a little longer. Dad, you have to go. I know. I'll be fine. I know that too. She walked him to his truck, and they stood in awkward silence for a moment. Thank you, Lily said finally, for everything, for never giving up even when things were terrible, for showing me that smart matters more than easy. Ethan couldn't speak. He just pulled her into a hug and held on until she pulled away. Go build your empire, she said. I'll see you at Thanksgiving. The drive back to Greenfield was long and quiet. Ethan stopped halfway, pulling into a rest area to call Elena. She answered on the second ring. How'd it go? She settled, happy. He paused. I miss her already. That's normal. You raised her well, Ethan. We'll see. They talked for a while, Elena filling him in on progress at the office, new projects in development, meetings scheduled for the following week. When they hung up, Ethan sat in the truck for a few more minutes before starting the drive home. Greenfield looked different when he arrived that evening, smaller somehow, but also more solid, more real. This was home. The place where he'd survived, struggled, and finally started to build something worth keeping. The Moretti North American office officially launched in September. The opening event was small. Local officials, industry partners, a handful of journalists. Elena flew in for it, giving a speech about innovation and partnership that somehow managed to be both professional and genuine. Afterward, she and Ethan walked through the facility, checking on equipment, greeting staff, making sure everything was running properly. This is good, Elena said. Better than I hoped. Yeah? You've built a real team here. People who care about the work, not just the paycheck. She stopped at a window overlooking the main workshop floor. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. We couldn't have done it without you. That's generous, but not entirely true. You were always going to succeed, Ethan. I just helped speed up the timeline. She turned to face him. So what's next? What do you mean? You've built the business. Lily's at school. The patents are secure. Production is scaling. What do you want now? Ethan hadn't really thought about it. He'd been so focused on surviving each challenge that he'd never considered what came after. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe just to keep doing this. Building things that matter. That's a good answer, Elena smiled. But there's more to life than work, says the woman who works 18-hour days. I'm working on that, actually. She looked out at the workshop again. I've been thinking about relocating, spending more time here instead of flying back and forth constantly. Here in Greenfield? Why not? The work is here. The team is here. She paused. You're here. Ethan felt his heart kick up. Elena, I'm not asking for anything, Ethan, just telling you what I'm thinking. She met his eyes. We make a good team. In business, yes, but maybe in other ways, too. He didn't know what to say. Hadn't let himself think about this possibility, too focused on just getting through each day. I'm not good at this, he said finally. Relationships, being open. I spent 10 years just surviving, and I don't know how to do anything else. Then learn. We'll both learn. She reached out and took his hand. No pressure, no expectations. Just see where it goes. Yeah, Ethan said. Okay. They stood there, hands linked, looking out at the workshop floor where people were building things that hadn't existed 6 months ago. It felt like a beginning. Over the next year, the business grew. Velocity Systems expanded their licensing agreement. Racing teams started winning with Ethan's technology in their engines. Moretti filed 3 more patents based on designs that came out of the Greenfield office. Ethan hired more staff, including a promising young engineer from the community college who reminded him of himself at that age. Smart, hungry, convinced the world wouldn't give him a chance. He made sure that kid got one. Elena relocated permanently in the spring, buying a house on the edge of town and commuting to the office with Ethan most mornings. They fell into a rhythm that felt comfortable, natural. Dinners at the mediocre diner, weekend drives to visit Lily at MIT, quiet evenings in the workshop working on new designs. It wasn't perfect. They argued about production timelines, disagreed on hiring decisions, got frustrated when things didn't move fast enough. But they worked through it, learning to be partners in all the ways that mattered. Lily came home for summer break and immediately noticed. So you and Elena are together? Ethan looked up from the prototype he was working on. What makes you say that? Dad, she has a coffee mug here with her name on it that you made. It was a joke. It's a relationship milestone disguised as a joke. Lily leaned against the workbench. I'm happy for you, both of you. Yeah? Yeah, you deserve to have a life, not just work. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just catching up. That evening, Ethan and Elena took a walk through downtown Greenfield. The summer air was warm, the streetlights just starting to flicker on. They passed the garage, the diner, the small park where Ethan used to take Lily when she was little. You know what I realized? Elena said. This town, it's easy to underestimate it, write it off as small, insignificant. But that's what makes it powerful. No one expects anything to come from here. So when something does, it matters more. Like me? Like you. She squeezed his hand. You proved that genius doesn't need credentials. It just needs opportunity. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, eventually circling back to Elena's house. She invited him in, and they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. I've been thinking, Ethan said, about what comes next, after Lily graduates, after the business is fully established. And I want to start a program for kids like me, smart, capable, but without access to traditional education. Give them workshop space, mentorship, resources, help them build the things they're dreaming about. Elena turned to look at him. That's a wonderful idea. Think Moretti would support it? I think we could make it happen. She smiled. We'll need a building, funding, staff. I know someone with a garage and a lot of empty land next door. They spent the next hour planning, ideas flowing fast and building on each other. A technical academy not tied to formal degrees, focused on hands-on learning and real-world projects. They'd call it the Cole Center for Applied Innovation. It felt right, full circle somehow. By the time Lily graduated from MIT 2 years later, the center was under construction. Ethan stood at her graduation, watching her walk across the stage with a degree in mechanical engineering, and thought about how far they'd both come. After the ceremony, they found a quiet spot on campus. I got a job offer, Lily said. From Moretti. Elena's been trying to recruit me for months. And? I'm thinking about it, but I also got an offer from a research lab in California. Autonomous systems, cutting-edge stuff. She looked at him. What do you think I should do? Whatever makes you happy. That's not helpful, Dad. It's the truth. You've earned the right to choose. He paused. But for what it's worth, I think you'd be great at either one. She hugged him. I'm going to take the California job, at least for a few years. I need to do my own thing first, you know? I know. But I'll come back eventually. Help you run the center, work on crazy projects, argue with you about designs. I'm counting on it. But the Cole Center for Applied Innovation opened the following spring. 20 students in the first cohort, all of them hungry and brilliant and convinced the world wouldn't give them a shot. Ethan taught the introductory course himself, showing them how to turn sketches into prototypes, how to test and iterate, how to believe their ideas were worth pursuing. It was the hardest work he'd ever done, and the most rewarding. Victor Hale made one final appearance, showing up unannounced at the center's opening ceremony. Ethan spotted him in the back row, watching the speeches with an unreadable expression. After the event, Victor approached. "Impressive," he said, gesturing at the building. "You've built something real here." "Thanks. I was wrong about you. I thought you were a fluke, someone who got lucky." Victor paused. "But you weren't lucky. You were just better than I wanted to admit." Ethan didn't know what to say. An apology from Victor Hale felt surreal. "I'm retiring," Victor continued, "stepping down from Hale Industries. Figured I should clear the air before I go." "Consider it cleared." Victor nodded and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan watched him go, feeling something like closure settle over the old anger. That evening, Ethan stood in the center's main workshop, alone after everyone else had left. The space smelled like fresh paint and machine oil, potential and possibility. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a struggling garage to this, a place where other people could chase their own impossible ideas. Elena found him there, as she often did. "Good day?" "Great day." She stood beside him, both of them looking out at the empty workstations, the tools waiting to be used, the blank whiteboards ready for sketches. "You did it," she said. "Everything you set out to do." "We did it." "Fair enough." She leaned against his shoulder. "So what's next?" Ethan smiled. "I have some ideas." And he did. New projects for the center, expanded partnerships with Moretti, maybe even teaching a course at the community college. But more than that, he had a life now. Not just work, but actual life. Lily pursuing her dreams, Elena by his side, a community that had gone from overlooking him to celebrating him. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was his. Built from nothing but stubbornness and a refusal to accept that circumstances define destiny. Years later, standing in that same workshop with students crowded around a prototype, Ethan would think about the moment Victor Hale had walked into his garage and dismissed him as nothing. How that dismissal had lit a fire, set everything in motion. He'd learned something important through all of it, that the world's opinion of you matters far less than your opinion of yourself. That expertise comes in many forms, not all of them credentialed. That the gap between where you are and where you want to be is bridged by work, not wishful thinking. And most importantly, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Ethan had spent 10 years convinced he was just a mechanic. Turns out, he'd been an engineer all along. He just needed the world to catch up. Now, watching his students bend over their own designs, arguing about tolerances and materials, he saw himself in every one of them. The hunger, the doubt, the quiet certainty that they could build something that mattered if someone would just give them the chance. He'd make sure they got that chance, because that's what people like him did. They built bridges where others saw walls. They proved that talent doesn't need permission, only opportunity. And they never ever stopped believing that the impossible was just difficult in disguise.